Hello, and welcome to our last of our spring webinar series at Extended Disc. Today, we're going to talk about another Extended Disc reinforcement report called Your Listening Style. We encourage your live questions. Unfortunately, we just don't have time to take them live on air. So put them in the question section. We'll follow up after. We will be recording this so you can share it or go back and listen to it. My name is Christina. I'm the training director here at Extended Disc, and joining me today is my lovely colleague, Amy Lipinski, senior trainer here.
Hello, everybody.
All right, let's get started. So, we have done quite a few of these reinforcement reports in the past. We've done communication strategy worksheet, we have done behavioral action plan, and we have done maximizing your strengths and development areas. And today we're going to focus on one of our newest reinforcement reports, which is your listening style. But before we do that, let's talk about why we develop these reinforcement reports.
Yeah, so Christina, I think one of the most common questions we get asked is, what's next? What do I do? My client just called me and wants a part 2 or a follow-up to the workshop because they just loved what they learned. And so that was really the impetus or the reason that we decided to develop these reinforcement reports. It's something that you can do with your clients to follow up after a workshop. It's still based on the Extended Disc questionnaire, so it's not like you need to learn a new report. The information is designed and laid out the same way that the Extended Disc individual assessment is, so it's familiar to you and your clients. And we often get asked then as well, how do I roll it out? Is there a certain order I need to go in? Like Christina had mentioned, all the reports we've covered in our webinar series so far, and there really is no specific prescription for the order or time frame in which you roll out the reports. You know your clients best, so you know what their needs are, and sometimes they might even come to you and tell you what their needs are. We'd like a part 2 about communication or about listening, right? So they're really designed to be standalone reports to supplement the questionnaire and be additional learning. And for the instructions, they're easy to do and easy to follow.
Exactly. So really with the questionnaire, it's the same questionnaire your clients already took the first time, so they don't need to take any additional questionnaire to generate these reinforcement reports. And as Amy said, the instructions are just simply reordering a different report. So Amy, why are we offering this new reinforcement report on listening styles, would you say?
Well, Christina, have you ever felt like you repeat yourself over and over again because people either don't hear you or understand your message the first time?
Well, as a parent, I'm sure that we can all relate to this. And yes, it happens in the work environment as well.
Absolutely. And why do you think that happens? I think that the messages are either ignored or misunderstood, which is frustrating as a parent on a personal level, and also really frustrating at the workplace. And when we have these types of miscommunications, what happens though as well is it can start to cause errors. We make mistakes at work. We might have to redo work because that message wasn't understood the first time. We may even have lower productivity in the workplace because that message is having to be repeated continually in order to be understood. And miscommunication, as we all know, can also lead to interpersonal conflict. So we think then, how does learning DISC really help others listen to me better?
So of course, if you guys have been through any of our trainings, you use our reports, you know anything about Extended Disc, you're gonna be familiar with these 4 steps to effective communication. And what this listening report does is it reinforces those 4 steps, just like we do all the time. Step 1 being, of course, understanding what the DISC styles are. How do we describe someone who is a D, I, S, or C? Step 2 is a critical component. It's that self-awareness piece. How do I identify your own style or your client style, and how specifically do I understand my listening style? How do I come across to others? Step 3 is just as crucial, not just your self-awareness, but also being able to identify the listening style of others so that you can ultimately reach step 4, which is how do I modify my own behaviors so that it improves the interaction with the other person? How do I get them to listen more engagingly in the interaction?
So learning DISC may not necessarily create that other person to be a better listener, but it gives us that awareness of how to adjust our message better. Typically, when we create our communication messages, we often create them based on our own communication preferences, which works great if the other person is just like us. But as we learn in step 1, they're not always like us. The styles are similar and different. And then step 2, as Christina mentioned, is learning more about ourselves. And so we do that with the listening reinforcement report. And it will break down then for us our listening preferences, what comes easy for us and what may be a little bit more challenging.
And what's great about these preferences is that they are based on your individual profile too, your natural style. So you can see here on this example of the report, it shows this person's top 7 most comfortable or easy behaviors when it comes to listening. And then it also lists the listening behaviors that tend to be most challenging for this person's natural style.
So once we have more awareness around our own listening preferences, next we need to understand how others prefer to listen. How do those other styles that are different or even similar to us, how do they prefer to listen?
And what's great again is it's built right into the report. It reminds us. So with starting with like the D style, how do D styles tend to listen? They tend not to be the most thorough listeners. They excel at multitasking, so they could be juggling a lot of things at once, or they're half listening to you, they're checking their email. They prefer those executive summaries, those bullet points. So they prefer to listen only to short explanations. They think about how this can benefit me. They're very individualistic style and they're very task oriented. They can be impatient listeners. They like to work at a very brisk pace. So they want you to move it along and get to what they need to know. What's the bottom line? And they tend to show their own feelings, meaning they may insert their own opinions and feelings about something over the listening part of it.
Right. And sometimes I think they also already made up their mind. So they insert their decision and they forget to listen to your.
Right. And, so oftentimes I tell people, you might have a lot of things you want to tell that D style, but I guarantee you by about your first or second point, they've probably made their decision and moved on.
Yep, exactly. So let's move on then. Onto our I styles. And our I styles just love our interaction. Remember, there are social butterflies of the styles. So when they're listening, it's just because they're enjoying the interaction. They might not listen to all those details. They focus a lot on feelings and emotions because they're people oriented versus task. So they might not really even be listening to the assignment or the details because they're listening for how that makes you feel. The emotion behind it. And as I mentioned, they're not into the details, right? So they're going to kind of just gloss over those. And because there are social butterflies, they enjoy talking. And they may just talk too much and not be as good of a listener because they want to interject and have a chance to speak.
Yes, they may be looking for those opportunities to speak. So then we move on to the S style. And with the S style, unlike the D's and I's who actually prefer to talk over listen, your S styles are your active and patient listeners. They're going to pay attention to what you have to say. In fact, for many of us who are not S styles, we oftentimes take someone's nodding as automatic agreement when we're interacting and talking to them. However, that S style may not even agree with what you're having to say, but they're basically telling you, hey, I hear what you have to say. So we need to be aware that their listening style can be different from our own. They may interrupt and resist if the message creates change because I think, Amy, you said it, S styles are steady eddies, they're emotion based, right? So
Mhm.
when they hear about, oh, I have these all great ideas, it's going to rock your world, it's going to change everything,
Yes.
they will have this initial emotional resistance to it. So they tend to be someone who listens well, but they may interrupt if the environment starts to feel unsteady and insecure.
Absolutely. And that moves us into our C styles. And our C style individuals can also be very attentive listeners, but typically only if they're interested in the topic. If they're not interested in the topic, you will clearly know that. They tend to look for logic in their presentation. And if a presentation doesn't have logic, they will input logic into it and try to organize it into a logical sequence because that's how they process their information. They tend not to give much feedback, um, really just because I think they're processing and absorbing the information. So you can't really always get a read on our C styles because they tend to be very quiet and reserved as they're listening. And as we know, our C's love details. And so oftentimes their listening style might get hung up in those details, asking those follow-up questions to get more and more details and maybe missing that big picture of the communication.
Exactly. So, basically what the report does, as with all of our reports, is that it helps us to recognize how we prefer to do things, in this case, listen, as well as have a better understanding of how different styles prefer to listen. So now we have that information, we can take it to step 4, which is to create our action plan. So this communication strategy plan, the report itself guides your clients through these 3 steps by talking about what do you want to start doing, what do you want to stop doing, and what do you want to continue doing in your interaction with this person. And what's great, again, is this is familiar to your clients. They've seen it in the individual assessment, they've seen it in other reinforcement reports. So in terms of start, what is it that you would like to start doing that would, if you were to do it, would improve your interaction with that person?
And then stop. What behaviors do you need to stop or avoid doing to help improve that listening and interaction with the other individual?
And just as importantly, continue. What behaviors would you continue doing because they are effective in your listening interaction with the person? So the goal here is to make clear, actionable steps that you can immediately begin to do.
And as you start to apply your action plan, then it's important that you recognize and celebrate the positive impact and hard work that you put into your behavioral adjustments. So keep track. What worked? What didn't work? Ask your clients to keep track of that. What would you maybe do differently next time to help continuing your learning and growth so that your message is heard that first time? And consider if there's a personal impact, a relationship impact, or even a monetary impact. And with our reports, you can use any one of our reinforcement reports in any order, like we said. I think the listening report is a great one to start off with. Even our communication strategy. Which ones kind of stand out to you, Christina?
I think those are 2 very good ones if you don't have a place to start. But remember, your client might come to you and say, I liked what we did about DISC. Can you focus in on negotiation this time? Or can we kind of bring back decision making? We have these different types of reports, and we're not going to list them all here because Amy and I are constantly working on them. But feel free to reach out to us if you are interested in learning more about our reinforcement reports. Know that we have a variety of them. So ultimately, what would you want people to take away today?
I think the biggest goal to keep in mind is to be comfortable with who you are. Behavioral adjustments are often very brief, but the opportunity for a successful interaction then is great. Don't try to change who you are. Embrace who you are and look at changing your behaviors.
That's a great message. So that was the end of our spring series, and now we are jumping into fall. I mean, fall. Oh my
Fall.
gosh.
Don't forget summer, please.
Well, I'm in Houston. We're in Houston, so we try to
Summer's
forget
every day.
summer. Yeah. So our next webinar coming up is next week, but it will be on a Thursday because I will be away at a conference, and we're going to talk about. Amy and I are going to talk about what happens when we don't adjust.
Looking forward to it, Christina.
All right, and that's at 3 o'clock Central Time, 15-minute webinar. Have a great day.